The morning did not arrive all at once. It crept in slowly, like a careful guest who knew it was not entirely welcome. First came the pale blue light, thin as breath, stretching across the plains. Then the sun followed, low and tired, brushing the tops of dry grass with gold that had seen better years. The land lay wide and quiet, holding its silence the way old men hold secrets. No birds sang yet. Even a wind seemed to wait. At the far edge of that open world stood a barn. It was not a proud barn. It's what had long ago given up the idea of looking new. Boards bowed slightly inward, as if the building itself had learned the habit of endurance. Rust crept across the hinges in slow, orange veins. One corner leaned just enough to suggest age, not collapse. It had been standing there longer than memory, longer than apology. This barn belonged to a cowboy who did not speak much anymore. He rose before the sun most days, not because he wanted to, but because sleep never stayed long with him. It slipped away quietly in the dark hours, leaving behind a restlessness that felt heavier than exhaustion. He dressed without ceremony. Worn boots, a shirt that had been mended more times than replaced, a hat whose brim had learned the shape of his hands. He moved through his mornings the way water moves through a streambed, guided by grooves carved over years. Outside, the air carried the smell of dust and old grass. It was the kind of smell that stayed in your lungs, reminding you where you were, reminding you that comfort was not something this land offered freely. He had lived alone since the silence first moved in. People in town had their ideas about him. Some said he was hard. Others said he was strange. A few said he carried bad luck the way some men carried prayer. He did not correct them. Words had stopped feeling useful to him a long time ago. He was feeding the horses when he noticed something that did not belong. At first, he thought it was a shadow cast wrong by the early light. The ground played tricks sometimes. Heat did that. Memory did too. But when the shape did not move with the sun, he set the feed bucket down and walked closer. Near the outer wall of the barn, half hidden by tall weeds and dust, lay a body. Small, still. The land seemed to tighten around the sight of her, as if it, too, understood the weight of this moment. He stopped a few steps away. His hands remained loose at his sides. Not fear holding him there, but caution. The kind born from knowing that some moments change things, and some doors, once opened, did not close quietly. She was native. That much was clear even before he saw her face. Her hair was dark and tangled, pulled back loosely, as if strength had run out before care did. Her clothes were worn thin, patched in places with thread that did not quite match. Dust clung to her skin like it had claimed her already. She was breathing. Barely. The cowboy knelt slowly, letting the earth feel his weight first. He did not touch her right away. He had learned that sometimes stillness was the first kindness. Her face was young, early 20s, maybe less. Hunger had sharpened her features, hollowed her cheeks, drawn shadows beneath her eyes. But even in that fragile state, there was something unbroken about her, a quiet dignity that had survived where strength had not. He reached for the canteen at his belt. When he tilted her head slightly and pressed the rim to her lips, her eyes fluttered open. Dark eyes, watchful even now. She tried to pull away, weak but instinctive, as if the world had taught her that help often carried a cost she could not afford. "It's all right," he said, softly, not loud enough to demand trust, just enough to offer it. She hesitated, then drank. Slow, careful. Each swallow seemed to cost her effort. When she finished, her hands trembled, and she closed her eyes again, not in sleep, but in something closer to relief. He left her where she was for a moment and returned with bread. Old bread, but real. He broke it into small pieces and set them near her hand. This time, she reached for it herself. They did not speak again. The barn door creaked open later that morning, and sunlight spilled inside, catching dust in its glow. He laid a blanket down in the far corner, away from the wind, away from eyes that might wander too freely. He gestured once, gently. She understood. She moved slowly, each step careful, pride keeping her upright when strength threatened to fail. When she sat, she pulled the blanket around herself with a kind of reverence, as if it were more than cloth. The barn changed after that. It was subtle, nothing you could point to, but the air felt different, less hollow, like a place where breath mattered again. He went about his work, but his attention returned to her again and again, not in suspicion, in quiet checking, making sure she was still there, still breathing, still part of the day. As the sun climbed, warmth settled into the boards. Outside, the land stretched endlessly, indifferent and familiar. Inside the barn, time slowed. She slept, not the shallow sleep of fear, but something deeper. Her breathing evened. Her hands loosened their grip on the blanket. For the first time in a long while, the world did not demand her attention. He sat on a crate near the door, his back against the wood, hat pulled low over his eyes. Memories came uninvited then. They always did when the day was quiet enough. Faces he had lost, voices he no longer heard. A time when the barn had held laughter instead of echoes. He did not chase the memories away. He let them sit with him, like old ghosts who meant no harm. Toward evening, the wind shifted. It carried something unfamiliar. Not danger, not peace, just a sense of being watched. He stood and stepped outside. The horizon was wide and empty, but the land had a way of holding presence even when nothing moved. He scanned the distance, his eyes tracing the curves of hills, the low places where shadows gathered early. Nothing. Still, the feeling remained. When he returned to the barn, she was awake. Their eyes met, and for a moment, the world narrowed to that simple exchange. No judgment, no gratitude spoken aloud, just recognition. She inclined her head slightly, a gesture of respect, not submission. He nodded once in return. Night came gently, laying its dark blanket over the plains. Stars emerged one by one, sharp and countless. The kind of sky that made a man feel small in a way that was almost comforting. He gave her a bowl of stew, thin but warm. She ate slowly, savoring each bite as if committing it to memory. When she finished, she placed the bowl carefully aside and rested her hands in her lap. She looked at him, then truly looked, as if measuring the shape of his kindness, trying to understand its weight. "Thank you," she said. The words were quiet, but they landed heavy. He cleared his throat. "You can stay the night." She studied his face, searching for something she had learned not to expect, finding only what was offered. "I won't be trouble," she said. He shook his head. "You already aren't." She lay back down, pulling the blanket close. He stepped outside again, closing the barn door partway, leaving it open enough for air for trust. He sat on the ground, his back against the wall, eyes lifted to the stars. Somewhere far beyond what the eye could see, something had shifted. Kindness had been given, and in a land that remembered everything, kindness was never forgotten. The land has a way of carrying news without words. Footsteps press meaning into the dust. Smoke lifts questions into the sky. Even silence, when it lingers too long, begins to speak. By the third morning, the woman could stand without swaying. She moved slowly at first, as if her body did not yet trust itself. Hunger had taught her caution, but strength returned in quiet measures. A little more each day, enough to lift a bucket, enough to sweep the barn floor with a broom whose bristles had long since lost their shape. She did not ask permission. She simply helped. The cowboy noticed, though he did not comment. He let the kindness move both ways. Let it settle into the space between them like something natural, something earned. She worked with care, as if every small task mattered. When she fed the animals, she paused before each one, touching their necks lightly, murmuring words he could not understand but felt no need to. When she swept, she gathered the dust into neat piles, carrying it outside and returning the earth to itself. In the evenings, when the sun dipped low and painted the barn walls in amber light, she sat on the step and watched the horizon. He sat nearby, never too close, never too far. They spoke little. When they did, it was of small things: the weather, the horses, the way the land changed color with the seasons. Words that carried no risk. Trust, they both knew, was not built with explanations. It was built with consistency. On the fourth day, he took her into town, not out of obligation, out of necessity. The supplies were low, and he had learned long ago that survival required motion as much as rest. She hesitated when he offered the spare horse. Her hand lingered on the saddle, fingers tightening briefly before relaxing again. She mounted with grace, though her body was still thin beneath her clothes. They rode in silence, dust rising behind them like a memory they could not shake. The town had not changed. It never did. Wooden storefronts leaned into one another as if sharing rumors. Faces turned as they passed, some curious, some wary, some openly disapproving. A rancher near the feed store narrowed his eyes. He was a broad man, thick-necked, with a voice that carried farther than kindness. "You bringing trouble back with you now?" he said, not bothering to lower his tone. The cowboy met his gaze without heat, just passing through. The woman kept her eyes forward. She had learned long ago that looking back invited worse. Inside the general store, the shopkeeper paused mid-count when he saw her. His smile flickered. Not gone, but unsure, like a candle fighting a draft. Supplies cost more than usual. The cowboy paid without comment. As they left, a boy no older than 10 stared openly at the woman, his curiosity unfiltered. She offered him a small smile. He smiled back before his mother pulled him away, scolding him softly. Outside town, the wind shifted again. Back at the barn, the evening settled into its familiar hush. Crickets began their slow music. The woman prepared food alongside him, chopping vegetables with steady hands. "You don't have to do that," he said, though there was no force in it. She looked up. "I want to." He nodded, accepting the truth of it. That night, as the stars emerged, she spoke more than she had before. She told him her people were scattered, that hunger had come quietly at first, then all at once, that she had walked for days, following instinct more than direction. He listened, did not interrupt, did not ask for details she did not offer. When she finished, she looked down at her hands. "I didn't think I would make it." He stared into the fire. "Sometimes making is quieter than we expect." She considered that, then nodded. Over the next few days, life found a rhythm. She mended a tear in his shirt without being asked. He repaired the fence that had sagged near the creek. They shared meals, shared silence, shared space that felt less empty with each passing hour. But the land was still speaking. One morning, he found tracks near the barn, not fresh enough to alarm, but clear enough to notice. Barely marked, placed with intention. Someone had stood there, watched, left without disturbing more than the dust allowed. He said nothing to her. In town, whispers grew louder. They spoke of nearby camps, of warriors, of old tensions that never truly healed. Some said it with fear, some with accusation, none with understanding. The shopkeeper mentioned it carefully, as if testing the ground. "Folks are talking." The cowboy met his eyes. Folks always are. That night, the woman grew quiet. She stood at the edge of the barn, staring out into the dark. Her shoulders were straighter now, her presence stronger. But something weighed on her. "They will come," she said at last. Not as a warning, as a fact. He did not pretend not to understand. "For what?" "For me," she said. "For you." He considered the fire, the way it consumed wood without malice. "If they do," she turned to him. "You shouldn't pay for my hunger." He looked at her then, really looked. Not as a burden, not as a cause, as a person who had shared his days. "Kindness isn't a debt," he said. She swallowed, emotion flickering briefly across her face before she mastered it. "Is where I come from." The wind rose that night, stirring the grass into motion. The horses shifted in their stalls, ears alert. Somewhere in the distance, an owl called. Before dawn, he stepped outside. The stars were fading, giving way to a sky heavy with promise. On the far edge of sight, a line of dust lifted, slow and deliberate. Not a storm, something alive. He stood there, breathing in the cool air, knowing without fear that whatever was coming had already been set in motion long before the first step reaches land. And inside the barn, the woman slept lightly, strength gathered, unaware that the world was drawing closer with every silent mile. Morning arrived wrapped in gray. The sun rose behind a thin veil of cloud, its light muted, as if the sky itself had chosen restraint. The land felt different. Not hostile, not peaceful either, just attentive. like a held breath stretched a little too long. The woman sensed it before she saw it. She stood at the barn door, fingers resting on the wood, her gaze fixed on the far hills. Her posture had changed over the past days. Hunger no longer bent her. Strength had returned to her shoulders, to her step. But now there was something else beneath it. Awareness. The kind carried by those who had learned to listen not only with ears, but with memory. "They're close," she said. The cowboy joined her, following her line of sight. Dust lingered faintly along the horizon, thin as a rumor. He nodded once. He had known this moment would come. Not in detail, just in shape. The land always balanced its scales, though it rarely announced how. They went about their morning quietly. He repaired a loose hinge on the stall door. She gathered herbs near the creek, moving with care, as if the earth were speaking instructions beneath her feet. When they ate, she barely touched her food. After a long silence, she set her bowl aside. "I should go." He did not answer right away. He watched the steam rise from his cup, the way it disappeared into nothing. "Go where?" "Away from this place. From you. Before my shadow becomes your burden." He met her eyes. They were steady, resolved, not afraid. "You didn't bring trouble here," he said. "Trouble follows me," she replied gently. "It always has." He considered the barn behind them, the quiet mornings, the way the space had softened since she arrived. He thought of the night he had first seen her lying in the dust, life hanging by a thread. "You leaving won't change what's coming." She closed her eyes briefly. When she opened them, there was moisture there, though her voice remained calm. "It will change who pays the price." He shifted his weight, uncomfortable not with her words, but with the truth inside them. He had spent years avoiding attachments precisely because of this, because caring always demanded something in return. "Stay," he said. The word landed between them, simple and heavy. She searched his face, as if looking for the hidden cost. "Why?" "Because this place chose you as much as I did," he said. "And because fear doesn't get to decide who deserves shelter." For a moment, she said nothing. Then she nodded. Once, as the day unfolded, memories surfaced. She spoke of her people then, more fully than before. Of land taken not with violence alone, but with neglect. Of promises that faded quietly. Of children growing thin while the world looked away. "We learned early that kindness rarely comes without a price," she said. "That is why we remember it so carefully when it does." He listened, the weight of history settling into his bones. He had been taught a different version of the land story, one that left many pages blank. He told her of his own loss. Not in detail, just enough. A family once. A future that had seemed certain. Gone in a season that taught him how quickly the world could empty itself. "I stopped believing anything good came back," he said. "I thought you gave, and the land took." She looked at him softly. "Sometimes the land keeps account longer than we do." In the afternoon, an old man appeared at the edge of the property. He did not approach the barn. He stood beneath a cottonwood tree, waiting. The woman saw him first. Her expression changed, a mixture of recognition and respect. She walked toward him, her steps steady. The cowboy followed at a distance, careful not to intrude. The old man's hair was silver, braided neatly down his back. His face was lined not with age, but with memory. His eyes were sharp, assessing. "You are safe," the old man said to her. "For now," she replied. The old man nodded, then glanced toward the cowboy. "Kindness has been seen," he said. "The land remembers." He did not elaborate. He did not need to. Before leaving, he placed a small carved token in her hand, a symbol of protection, a belonging. "Debts are gathering," he said quietly. "Not all are paid with blood." Then he turned and disappeared into the trees, leaving behind a silence thicker than before. That evening, the sky darkened early. Clouds pressed low, heavy with the promise of rain that never came. The air felt charged, as if the world itself were preparing for something unnamed. The woman packed her few belongings carefully. The cowboy watched, saying nothing. "I will not run," she said finally, "but I will stand with truth." He nodded. "That's all any of us can do." As night fell, the distant sound of hooves reached them. Not close enough to see, close enough to know. She stood beside him at the barn door. The wind lifted her hair, revealing the strength in her face. She was no longer the starving figure he had found in the dust. She was something fuller now, something remembered. Whatever comes, she said, I am grateful. He looked at her, the words catching briefly in his throat. Me too. They stood together as the land exhaled, the horizon darkening, the dust line growing more defined with each passing hour. Some debts are paid in fear. Others are paid in courage. And some, the rarest of all, are paid in kindness returned. At dawn, the earth would answer. Dawn did not break. It unfolded. The first light slid across the land like a careful hand, touching the tops of grass, the worn boards of the barn, the quiet faces of two people who had not slept. The air was cool, almost gentle, as if the world itself wished to soften what was coming. Then the ground spoke, not with thunder, with rhythm. Hooves, many of them, measured, unhurried. The sound carried weight, not menace. It rolled across the plains like a slow drumbeat, steady and deliberate. The cowboy stepped outside first. He did not reach for his rifle. It remained inside the barn, leaning against the wall where it had rested for years. He stood with his hands empty, his posture straight, his heart loud in his chest but steady. The woman came to stand beside him. She was calm now, not because she did not understand the gravity of the moment, but because she did. Her spine was straight, her chin lifted. Whatever fear had once lived in her had already been starved out by truth. The dust on the horizon thickened. Then shapes emerged. Horses, rows of them, dark against the rising light. One after another, they came into view until the land itself seemed to fill with motion. 200 warriors. They formed a wide arc before the barn, not closing in, not charging. They stopped as one, horses settling beneath them, breath visible in the cool morning air. Spears and bows were carried, yes, but held low. No arrows were notched. No weapons raised. Silence followed. It was the deepest silence the cowboy had ever known. Not empty, full. He felt suddenly small, not in weakness, but in perspective, like a man standing inside a story much older than himself. The woman stepped forward. Her feet touched the earth with purpose. She moved just far enough to be seen clearly by those before her. The warrior's eyes followed her, recognition passing through them like a current. She spoke then, not loudly, not in anger, in her own language, words flowing with a cadence that felt like memory. The cowboy did not understand the sounds, but he understood the shape of them. They were not accusations. They were truths. She told them of hunger, of collapse, of a barn at the edge of the world where no questions were asked, of water given before names, of bread shared without debt. She gestured back toward the man behind her. She told him of kindness. When she finished, she turned and looked at the cowboy. For a moment, time paused between them. Then the first warrior dismounted. He was tall, broad-shouldered, his hair bound tightly behind him. He moved slowly, deliberately, as if each step was a decision made with care. He knelt, pressing his hand to the earth. One by one, the others followed. 200 warriors dismounted. The sound of boots touching ground echoed softly, like rain finally falling after a long drought. Horses were tied, heads bowed. The arc became a gathering. The cowboy's breath caught. An elder stepped forward. His face was weathered, eyes deep with years and understanding. He studied the cowboy for a long moment, not as a judge, but as a witness. You fed one who was starving, the elder said. You sheltered one who was hunted by absence. You did not ask who she belonged to. The cowboy swallowed. I just did what was in front of me. The elder nodded. That is how the truest things are done. A signal passed quietly through the group. Bundles were brought forward. Food, dried meat, grain, blankets, tools. Enough to last not weeks, but seasons. They were laid gently at the edge of the barn. Not payment, not tribute. Protection. What you gave to one of us, the elder continued, you gave to all of us. Kindness is not forgotten where we come from. It gathers. It returns. The woman stood beside the cowboy again. Her eyes shone, not with tears, but with something stronger. Belonging. No threats were spoken. No demands made. Instead, the warriors mounted their horses once more. Slowly, respectfully. Before leaving, The elder met the cowboy's gaze one last time. You are not alone on this land anymore. Then they turned. Dust rose again, but this time it felt different. Lighter, like something heavy had been lifted. When the last rider disappeared beyond the hills, the land exhaled. The silence that followed was warm. The barn stood as it always had, but it no longer felt forgotten. It felt chosen. The cowboy sat heavily on the step, the weight of the moment settling into him. The woman sat beside him, close now, close enough that their shoulders touched. For a long time, neither spoke. The sun climbed higher, burning away the last of the morning chill. Birds returned to the sky. Life resumed, changed in ways that could not be measured. Finally, he broke the silence. I didn't know kindness could come back like that. She smiled softly. Most people don't. That's why it matters when it does. Days would pass. Seasons would turn. The story would travel, changing shape with each telling. Some would call it legend. Others would doubt it entirely. But the land would remember. And somewhere, long after dust settled and footprints faded, a barn at the edge of the world would stand as proof that one small, quiet act can move more than armies. Sometimes the bravest thing a person can do is simply open a door. And sometimes the world answers. If this story touched something in you, if it reminded you that kindness still matters in a hard world, then let it be a reminder you carry forward. Like this story, if you believe one good act can change more than we ever see, comment the moment that stayed with you the longest. Subscribe for more slow, soulful Wild West tales told like old memories. And tell me gently, from where in the world are you listening to this story tonight?